Welcome to The Warehouse. Have you ever heard a sermon and thought, how in the world did he discover that? Or where did he get that idea? Every week at Cornerstone Church, two teams dig into the biblical text that'll be taught during our weekend services. We spend hours talking about the text, the context, the culture of the time, you name it. But you can't stuff all that into a 30-minute message. That's where we come in. We're going to show you the stuff in the warehouse that didn't make it to the stage. You can tell him, shut it, Ginger.
Did you get that?
Yes.
Just you can tell him
silence after
You can tell him, shut it, Ginger was the first thing that popped up. All right.
Oh, I was getting ready to say something. Got
Ready?
it. Yeah, I've been born ready, dude.
You haven't been born ready.
I'm ready.
Are you been born ready?
I've been born again ready.
Hey-oh. He's uneducated and judgmental. Oh, that was 2
Tell me
weeks ago.
something I don't know.
Okay.
That also came with being homeschooled.
You do science experiments?
Shut your face. At least I can read.
He
Your
can
son
read.
can read. Haha.
Dingus.
Ready?
It's impossible to... I'm trying to scoot this over just a little bit. But the fact that
Too springy.
Do
Too
we
springy.
need to hit it again? Can I?
Yeah, one more
You want me
time.
to
One more
clap
time.
again?
Do it,
One,
yeah. Hey, Nathan.
Hey,
Have you observed Holy Week before?
not in a full Holy Week kind of way. I've been a part of a Seder meal that Cornerstone did at one point in time.
Ooh.
It was super cool. I remember specifically that I kind of liked the bitter herbs, which I'm not sure you're supposed to, but
That's
there's
right.
something
I
about them.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, and something about them dipped in the salt water and stuff. That I'm like, that's kind of a
Yeah.
nice flavor palette.
And we'll talk more a little bit in a little while about
Yeah.
what a Seder meal is.
Yep.
But that's cool.
Yep.
So nothing really big or official for the whole week.
No, and then I remember as a family, sometimes on Good Friday, we would watch The Passion of the Christ,
Ooh,
which is just gut wrenching.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
hard watch.
Yeah.
Stephanie.
Yeah, so I have done a Seder meal as well, but not at Cornerstone. Ours was done differently. How long ago was the Cornerstone one?
Ooh, it was at Bainbridge.
Oh, so a while back.
Yeah.
Old Bainbridge Trail.
9835 Old Bainbridge Trail.
Whoa.
That's good. I can't believe you remember that. Anyways, I did it last year for the first time, and it was really enjoyable, and it was good. Did it with a group of friends, and then we plan to do it again this year on Wednesday.
Very cool.
So whenever this is coming out,
Yeah.
Tonight.
we will be doing it that evening.
You'll be doing it tonight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very
Oh,
cool.
and then we also did a foot washing at our church that I used to go to. Whenever
Before the meal.
No, I know. Whenever I was a new believer, in the very beginning, I went to a church and we did a service where we washed each other's feet.
Was that tied to Holy Week or just
Yes.
it was okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been a part of a foot washing service as well, but it was not in Holy Week. It was just a way of serving one another.
Same.
Yeah, they did it on Thursday or Wednesday or something.
Very cool.
How about you, Jay?
I grew up in a tradition where we were a little more liturgical, and we often did things for Holy Week. Not very many Seder meals. I was when I was in college, I pastored a couple churches, and I did a Seder meal. So Seder meal is the Passover meal that we would have celebrated. For us who celebrate Maundy Thursday, that's what that night would be on Maundy Thursday. And so I did that once. That was awesome, being able to weave in the Passover where we believe Jesus took the bread and which cup that he took and making Holy Communion out of it. That was very cool. But yeah, Good Friday has always been to a Good Friday service. So if you haven't guessed by now, that's what we're talking about this week, Holy Week. And we're going to talk through some of the things the church is going to be doing for Holy Week. So the question, what is Holy Week?
Ooh. So it's the week between Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem and Easter, the day of his resurrection.
Awesome. And so specifically, we're going to be talking about Palm Sunday. We're going to be talking about Maundy Thursday and Good Friday.
And a little bit of a kind of upset that we've
some
discovered.
controversy.
Yeah.
Maybe a little controversy. So we might call it Wild Wednesday instead of Maundy Thursday.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I guess So Holy Week is a different idea than Passover. Passover is a Jewish holiday.
Festival.
So talk through a little bit of the difference between Holy Week and the Passover.
So Passover was more specific on a day, where unleavened bread was the week that it was the feast of unleavened bread. Yeah.
And a couple of weeks back when we were talking through Nicodemus, we had kind of given the idea, as I listened through, we kind of gave the idea that it was like Labor Day weekend, Passover weekend. And we talked about Nicodemus and Joseph being made unclean by handling Jesus's body and making it think, well, they were disqualified from the rest of Passover weekend's activities. They weren't. Passover was
one day. But there was still the Feast of Unleavened Bread that would have been going on during that time.
So they did make themselves ceremonially unclean for a big ceremony, a big week, but it wasn't Passover related. It was the Festival of Unleavened Bread.
Right.
I'm like just going to give a small disclaimer, at the beginning of this that I think there's a very high, we are learning a lot of things about this. So there's a very high likelihood that we're going to say something, that we are maybe not quite on about. We always approach this with a measure of humility, but I feel especially as I'm getting ready to talk about things with festivals and feasts, I'm like, man, I'm learning and growing and also don't have all the right answers. So if there's something that you're like, hey, that's not actually right, then please send us a message.
Yeah.
And it's fun diving back in to see how the feasts, how the festivals tie into relationship with God, to the Israelites, to us today, and how Jesus is woven into the center.
Yeah.
So we're going to mess things up from messing up thinking Passover was like Labor Day weekend all the way to me messing up how many which milks are in a tres leche cake, which I've also done recently.
It's one of those. It's like what we're trying to do here is model good good scholarship and dialogue about this stuff. So we're not coming to this as the experts.
Yeah.
We're coming to this as fellow learners to share what we're learning.
Oh, that's good. And so one of the things we would highly encourage is for you guys to study up as well.
Yeah.
Do your research and talk to us about it. Send us some messages when you want to push back.
Yeah, because these are things that we are necessarily finding this week or the day of coming to it. So we were actually supposed to record this podcast last week. And then me and Nathan during a meeting came across Passover and some things that we discovered. And we're like, wait. We need to process this a little bit more before we decide to have this conversation.
Yep.
So it's just, good theological conversation and being able to call out one another when we see error and still loving each other as we do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And there's a number of barriers between here and our understanding of this as well. It's all three of us are white Americans and without any.
Speak to yourself.
Yeah. I was speaking for myself and for you and for Stephanie. And we live in the 21st century. So it's crossing significant barriers to think how would a, Middle Eastern Jew in, the first century approach this. So anyway.
Definitely. Well, what do you say we dive in? Palm Sunday. So this last Sunday, when we were talking through Judas and the last Sunday of This Is My Story, it was actually Palm Sunday. Why do we call it Palm Sunday?
Oh, why do we, Stephanie?
I pointed.
You pointed at me.
She pointed.
I mean, it specifically has to do with them laying down palm branches as Jesus was entering, riding on a colt or a donkey, right?
Yeah. Some laid down their coats, some grabbed branches.
Yep. And so, it's a significant moment. And it there's tons of contrast between that and then later on in the week whenever they're shouting crucify him. So whenever they're hailing him basically as, Messiah, the King, it's a crazy contrast. So anyway, it's the triumphal entry.
Yeah, so John 12 through 19. So just to give you some scripture to go with it, and then Zechariah 9:9 from the Old Testament. You have a better reading voice, Jay.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Do you want to read it?
You want me to read that?
Oh,
The next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying out, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel." And Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, just as it is written, "Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written about him and had been done to him. The crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to bear witness. The reason why the crowd went to meet him was that they had heard he had done this sign. So the Pharisees said to one another, "You see that you are gaining nothing. Look, the world has gone after him."
Cut that, Parker. Cut that.
That was good reading, Nathan.
Just had to show that other people can read on this podcast. Not cool. I'm here for one thing.
Oh, so funny.
Comedic relief.
So Jesus comes in, and we had talked again last week or the week before about how many people were in Jerusalem during this time, approximately upwards of a couple million.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
That's just nuts because
we never imagined that though.
Yeah, we don't picture that because the normal. Do you guys remember what the normal population usually was at that time of Jerusalem? We had looked it up, and I can't remember if it was.
Parker, are you looking?
30,000 to 50. I was thinking 50,000, so somewhere around there, and then population is going to balloon. To a couple million people.
Because they're coming to the temple.
Yeah.
So why are they all coming to Jerusalem right now? Giving a overview. So they're coming to
the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Yep.
And to celebrate Passover together.
Which Passover we see in Exodus whenever the angel of death. No, is that what it's called? The angel of death?
Yeah.
Passes over. I'm didn't know if I was doing some Harry Potter reference or something.
When the Dementors passed over.
That was the worst part of Passover. The Dementors.
We're going to get some angry emails about this.
And guys, I don't even watch Harry Potter.
Yeah. I do.
But whenever they take the blood of the lamb and put it on their doorpost, so that was...
So it was the 10th and final plague before the Exodus,
Yeah.
And so Jesus comes into Jerusalem with the people shouting, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel." And this is the start to the week that Jesus offers himself up for our sins and is crucified. So what a crazy week this is going to be. Okay. So that's Palm Sunday. You mentioned Zechariah 9:9. "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey."
You couldn't go without reading, could you?
I love it. Your voice is sultry.
I appreciate that. So we go. So that's Sunday.
Yeah.
Triumphal entry. Jesus, Sunday goes and stays close to Jerusalem in Bethany is what we would read that he stays at. Does he stay at Lazarus's?
So you're talking about in Bethany?
Yeah. He stays in Bethany.
Wasn't that at
Simon's house?
Yes. There's Simon the Pharisee and Simon the... Right?
So we talked through that.
Nope.
That was part of Jesus' story as well, right?
Yeah.
That's where we think Mary anointed Jesus with the costly perfume. Yeah. And so Jesus is staying close to Jerusalem this week. So Monday through Thursday, some crazy things are going on in Jerusalem and around it. So what's Jesus doing Monday through Thursday?
He's flipping tables.
Yeah. I mean, this is this gets super intense in Jesus' ministry. Like some of the most scathing stuff he does, the stuff that garners like lots of hatred for Jesus. A lot of those things happen in this last week.
Yeah.
And I just think of I think it's Luke's gospel that for a lot of the narrative says like Jesus didn't let them reveal it because his time had not yet come. And then there comes a point in the gospel where he says that Jesus turned his face toward Jerusalem. And so it's this like reorienting, like, okay, it's getting ready to happen. And he gets there and he just like, just opens up the can of worms, and it really causes the Pharisees and other leaders and the crowds even to come to hate him enough to kill him.
Yeah, that's good. So he cleanses the temple. He goes in. There's all kind of salesmen at the place. They've turned a house of prayer into something that is just unrecognizable. Flipping tables, like you said.
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead.
I was just going to read it.
Yeah, go for it.
Matthew 21:12 through 17. And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers." And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple, "Hosanna, Hosanna to the Son of David," they were indignant. And they said to him, "Do you hear what these are saying?" And Jesus said to them, "Yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babies you have prepared praise?" And leaving them, he went out of the city to Bethany and lodged there.
Nice.
Ooh, man. And then the next morning, after he lodges, he curses the fig tree. That's one of the things that is during that week. One of the major things that you kind of talked to, Nathan, was how he intensified his critique and things got real. And one of the things that happens is that he talks through these woes to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, just raining down some judgment on these guys.
Yep.
And then Matthew 24, he foretells the destruction of the temple that's going to come, and he parallels that with his death and resurrection.
Yep.
That's a busy couple days.
I don't think I'd ever realized how much of how many of these stories and teachings of his happened in that last week.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of surprising to me as we studied.
Yeah. He really, I think we talked about how concentrated his message against the message that the Pharisees and the Sadducees were bringing, against all of the weight and the burdens that the religious leaders had put on the people. And he concentrated that this week as he was going to the cross. Yeah.
And so as we've talked about plenty of times, like John is not the gospel to go to if you want to experience this chronologically.
Yeah.
But if you want to see more chronologically what happened, you can go to Matthew 21 and read the triumphal entry, and then read like the next 5 chapters. And that talks about the stuff that happened in his last week until at 26, you hit the Last Supper and betrayal and stuff.
So Matthew 21 to 26 is that last week.
Yeah.
Man. So so traditionally in the church, the next day we come to would be Thursday. Maundy Thursday. That's a weird word. Maundy. Maundy Thursday. Maundy, derived from the Latin word mandatum, meaning commandment. The term refers to the commandment given by Jesus at the Last Supper. "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another." Out of John 13. So during that night, and again, traditionally, the church has commemorated it. Celebrated is a strange word. Remembered it on being Thursday. So Thursday, we see Jesus before the meal. Jesus, the King of the universe, God incarnate, taking the role of the lowest servant in the house and washing his disciples' feet, washing the feet of Peter, who would deny him, washing the feet of Thomas, who would doubt the resurrection, washing the feet of Judas, who would betray him, washing their feet. Going from that into the meal where we get the Last Supper from, the Seder celebrating the Passover. He would take the afikomen, the broken matzah, and say that this was his body, Jesus' body. That's where we get the bread, where we're breaking the body. This is his body broken for you. The fourth cup in Maundy Thursday is the cup of redemption, the cup that Jesus took and said, this is my body, the blood of the new covenant. After the Seder meal, we talked about this too with Judas' story, that Jesus tells him he's going to be the one that betrays him. Judas leaves. Jesus and the disciples go to the Garden of Gethsemane. That story is, here we are, just right one thing after another into the garden. Jesus prays in the garden while his closest disciples fall asleep. And then the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. And that was all on Thursday. Right, guys?
So this is where you need to buckle up your seatbelts for just a second, because
especially if you've grown up like I did, in a more liturgical.
Why don't you explain what liturgical?
I will not.
What that means for people who are not raised in a liturgical church.
Yeah. So I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and so United Methodists and Lutherans and some Presbyterians, we would be.
I said it.
More. So we follow the church calendar. Those would be the churches where you see the pulpit and the table. They have different color coverings on the tables, different color stoles sometimes on the pastors if they wear robes and stoles. And we're celebrating different times of the year. And so liturgy is really just the order of the service and how there are responsive readings happen more often in those things, and joint prayers where we're all praying together, written prayers, things like the doxology is usually sung after the offering in most of the churches when I had grown up. And in those churches, we would go to more, celebrating these types of things regularly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Maundy Thursday. Unless
it wasn't on Thursday.
So I kind of want to, before you get into it, Nathan,
Please.
I kind of want to set I read this article, and so I want to lay this out really quick. The word Passover has been and is still used in several ways by God's people. And in biblical accounts, the context must determine its meaning. Passover can reference three different things. One, the week-long festival, which was also called the Days of Unleavened Bread. Two, the actual feast of the Passover, which was also called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This took place on the Nisan 15. Is that how we would say it? And then three, Nisan. Okay. Three, the lamb was sacrificed and eaten at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So when Jesus said, with desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer, which is from Luke 22:15, he was making a reference to the evening meal on the first day of the 7 days of Passover. On the day of preparation, Nisan 14, Jesus was not referring to the actual feast of the Passover, which would then take place the next day, Nisan 15, or to the Passover lamb sacrificed on Nisan 14 and eaten on the evening of Nisan 15 at the feast of the Passover. Hopefully you guys are all keeping track so far. So there's a lot of dates that I kind of just threw at you. But okay, back to you, Nathan.
The big thing here, in broad strokes, I've grown up just assuming that Jesus died on Friday, right? That it's Good Friday. And that's where, we're having a Good Friday service this week and all that. So I had not really encountered why we say that it was on Friday until relatively recently. And so the reason we think Jesus died on a Friday has to do with one verse in Mark 15, and where it says that it was the day of preparation for the Sabbath. And so we then say, oh, well, it's the Sabbath is Saturday.
Mhm.
And so that means he died on a Friday.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is the basis for like why we say
Right.
Good Friday. But there's an interesting thing that happens with Jewish festivals that they had their weekly Sabbath that would have been a Saturday. They also had Sabbaths at the beginning and end of some of their high festivals, specifically with the Feast of Unleavened Bread. If you go back and look at it in Exodus 12, it talks about that the first and last day are to be a Sabbath and that they are to be considered a high day,
Yep. A high Sabbath.
a
Yep.
high Sabbath.
So Holy Week,
Yep.
the week Jesus gives himself up for us, realistically had 2 Sabbaths
Yes.
Yes. And then another Sabbath
At the end.
at the
in
end.
a week and a half.
Yep.
Right. So there would have been this Sabbath on Friday, the Nisan 15 would have been considered a high Sabbath. And then there would have also been a Sabbath that Saturday, their regular day of rest.
So Friday is the festival Sabbath. Saturday is their normal Sabbath day.
Yeah. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread, day of convocation. And it's a high Sabbath. So that would have been at sunrise. So that would have been considered Friday's daytime hours. It's very confusing.
So here's the big picture, because I know this can be really, like, for me, I had to sit down and write this out to see
make a
it.
chart.
So here's the big thing. There's a lot of reasons to think that like Jesus could have died on Thursday. Some people would even say like potentially on Wednesday, depending on how it fell, because it's not the Passover meal and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is not tied to a day of the week. It's tied to a day of the month. So it would have rotated around.
Yeah.
So with that, if it did happen on Thursday, there's some really interesting stuff. It could have happened. So if that's the case, then Jesus would have been being crucified at the same time that the Passover lambs were being killed. They were not crucified.
Oh, yeah.
But that they're being killed, and which Paul says in 1 Corinthians that Jesus is our Passover lamb.
Yeah.
So like I could see that, and that would be some really neat imagery if he is dying at the same time that the lambs are being killed.
Right.
The other really fascinating thing with that would be if that was the day, 4 days prior to that was the day that they were supposed to select their unblemished, their spotless lamb.
Yep.
And then they were going to bring it into their home, I think, for the next 4 days before they would kill it. So they actually have like some time to bond with it before they kill it for their sins. And so that would back up, and that would say that Jesus, as he's being brought in for the triumphal entry, is coming in on the same day that they were selecting their spotless lamb. And so they're all saying, Hosanna in the highest, and they're effectively selecting their spotless lamb, who's going to then reside in Jerusalem or around there for the next 4 days, and then die with those lambs on Thursday.
Come on.
Yeah. So we started doing this like whole thing, and I called our friend Jonathan, and I was like, hey, explain some of these feasts to me, which I still probably messed it up. So I apologize if I did. But he was like, well, let's think of some things that we would consider, like things that Jesus said is that he would be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. And so like just laying it out in this, it doesn't disprove, or does the days matter that much? Like, no, but it's just really neat when we get to look at it through this lens of like, man, we just always assumed it was Friday because of the Sabbath. But what if, so.
Yeah. And so as you're talking about, Stephanie, it's kind of hard to get to Jesus being dead for 3 days and 3 nights if he died on Friday.
Right.
You can say that he was dead for 3 days if you say he was dead for part of a day on Friday, he was dead all day Saturday, and dead for, a few hours after midnight on Sunday or whatever. But you can't get that he was dead for 3 nights because he would have only been dead for Friday night and Saturday night. But if you back it up to Thursday, then you have Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. Part of the day, you've got part of the day Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I think is how it adds up. So it's 3 days and 3 nights.
Yeah.
Right. And then also another thing that like kind of really hit me was just going through this. Thursday would have been considered Wednesday evening for us. Like that would have been the start of Thursday.
Yeah, there's sundown to sundown.
Yes, which I was like, why did they do that? Genesis 1:5, because evening and morning, that was the first day. So that's why. So going back to that, so Wednesday evening, that's when Jesus would have been taken and arrested, which is just another thing that blows my mind. So many times that Jesus could have been taken, and he was like, nope, like doing his little back flip out of there. And then here
Throwing
he's
the
like,
smoke
okay,
bomb.
go ahead.
Yeah. Throwing the
Yeah.
smoke bomb and disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
And so so if you push it back a day, and it's Wednesday, when their Last Supper is instituted, and that means Monday and Tuesday, and then
Super
Wednesday
intense.
afternoon, Jesus is going to town
Yeah.
against the Pharisees and Sadducees.
Well, and so like another thing that we kind of pushed back on a little bit was like, okay, then why didn't they eat the lamb at the Passover meal? Like if the lamb wasn't dead yet. And so knowing that there's 2 different feasts that could have been taking place during that time is pretty neat too. Cause I just always assumed that, oh, well, they had that one day, that one time that they would have done this. So it's just, but again, like get in the Bible, read it, learn it. Let us know if you have any like things. It was just exciting to see something that I've never learned before.
And so traditionally it's held that it was Thursday night. It could have been Wednesday night. And so we roll into Good Friday, which I guess could be
Good Thursday.
could be Tubular Thursday. Tubular? No?
No.
I
No.
don't get it.
So Good Friday. Good Friday starts with the trial.
Yeah.
Jesus being given to death with the crowd choosing Barabbas.
Yeah.
Jesus crucified.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Good Friday is usually, I mean, even if churches don't do much for Holy Week, a lot of them will still have a Good Friday service. A specific Good Friday service versus their weekend services. So,
and that's something that we're doing for the first time this year. The first time since I've been at Cornerstone, is a special Good Friday service that's different than our Easter services, that is specifically geared toward helping us remember the sacrifice of Jesus. One of the things that we've reflected on is that we love the party of Easter Sunday morning. It's appropriate that we party whenever we're celebrating that Jesus is alive. But that party is made even more special and richer whenever we remember what happened on at his crucifixion. So this year, our Good Friday service is going to be something like really special. We're pulling from a liturgical tradition and doing something that's called a tenebrae service, which tenebrae is Latin for darkness. And this service is going to be structured in such a way that it's going to start off with multiple candles lit, and then as we walk through the last hours of Jesus' life, we're going to go from him being surrounded by his closest friends and partners in ministry to being betrayed and abandoned and denied and all of those things. And so our service is going to get gradually darker as we go throughout the service, representing how Jesus was abandoned until at the end he was alone, suffering. And so it's going to be a time for us to remember that and be grateful, and also like even have some time to confess sin and sit in it being a little bit solemn. And this is going to be a family service, which is interesting because it's not one of those like fun bopping kids services. It's going to be a chance for us as parents to let our kids see how much the sacrifice of Jesus means to us. But
at the same time, you mentioned Passion of the Christ earlier. We're not getting...
No, it's not going to be gruesome. It will be appropriate for families, but while still feeling the weight of what happened.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. And so that's Good Friday. And we roll into the weekend. And so whether or not Jesus was crucified on Friday or he was crucified on Thursday, we know and we have been convinced that Sunday morning comes and there's nobody in the grave.
Amen. Yeah.
No, Stephanie?
And that's
Stephanie's not.
It's like that's
Guys
so important. And like whenever it is like one of the, biggest deals for our faith. In fact, whenever you go through and study like the epistles, whenever there's a like kind of an apologetic offered for like, how do we know? how do we know that we're believing the right thing? It basically always comes down to the resurrection.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned on the podcast before how like that was one of the major anchors of your faith, Jay.
Yeah. The only.
Yeah.
Well, there for a couple years, it was the only that Jesus is alive.
Mm-hmm.
And how that is the anchor of our faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Jesus is alive.
He is.
And that's something to celebrate. So when we get to Sunday morning and we're celebrating, that's a little different than our Good Friday service.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have the same tenebrae. So our Friday services and our Sunday services are going to be different this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
And so just backing up for just a second, one of the things that we are giving to families and just people in general at the services is a Holy Week guide. And as a part of that, we're going to be presenting a Passover meal kit, or I guess guide is a better way to say that.
Instructions?
That if you want to do it if you want to have a Passover meal with your friends, your family, your small group, we've got a guide available for you. You can also find it on the website. If you're like, you know what, that'd be really cool to do on Wednesday or Thursday night to celebrate like that same kind of meal in remembrance of Jesus.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then we get to celebrate the resurrection on Sunday.
Yep.
Oh, and so because Easter is the day of celebration and victory, and that's why during Lent is 40 days, but we don't count Sundays in those 40 days because Sunday is the day we celebrate the resurrection, and we don't mourn on Sunday because we're Easter people, and we can't be mourning and thinking about our sin when Sunday's the day where we celebrate the risen Christ who's taken it away.
Yeah. So one other neat thing that's going on this week that you may want to be a part of is a 48-hour prayer vigil.
Yeah.
And it's going to be something really neat because we're inviting all of you to join us in praying for what God wants to do in hearts for Easter Sunday specifically, for salvations and for people to return to Him and their first love. And so we're offering a sign up for people to jump in and take 10-minute slots. And we're going to have the last 48 hours of the week from Friday at noon until Sunday at noon, whenever Easter services finish up, bathed in prayer. Because we know that we can plant, we can water the seed, but God alone is the one who can bring the growth and the harvest.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're begging Him to do.
Yeah. So we're not just praying for like numbers and attendance for people to walk in through the doors, but we're praying for hearts to be changed and to turn to Jesus.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So if they missed it Sunday, how will they sign up for that?
It'll be on the website. So cornerstonechurch.community.
Awesome.
You can find it there. Or I think there's also, I think that's probably the best place.
Yeah. Great. Anything else?
I don't think
Got
so.
it? Did we do it?
I've got like one more.
Ooh, I love
One
it.
more. Well, it's not anything big. It's just like as Stephanie and I are excited to share about this, like the potential of what if it was on Thursday. But I also still have some pause there whenever I'm just like, hey, the church has celebrated Good Friday for, a couple thousand years. So if you're in the spot of like, I don't know, I don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
We just wanted to like posit that maybe there's another way to think about this.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah. And we pushed recording of this episode back because I had that pause.
Yeah.
Because I wanted you to just talk
Make
through it
sure.
with me a little more.
Yeah.
And I love and this is one of the things that I really love about getting deeper into study and context of things is how it's just fun to think about these things especially these things that don't do anything to the foundation of what we believe.
Right.
But can add some flavor and some cool things to it.
Yep.
Yeah, but Sunday, like we still believe in, like we're still holding on to Sunday.
Jesus still died on the cross for our sins.
Yes.
And He still rose from the grave on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on
That's
Sunday,
the core belief.
Peter and John raced to see an empty tomb.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, that's just all I wanted to add was if anybody's still like, pondering that.
That's awesome. It's going to be a fun end of the week. So come on to the church Friday and Sunday if you can. Friday we'll commemorate the crucifixion, and Sunday we'll celebrate that the tomb is empty.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, thanks, guys. Any questions, any comments, any complaints? Warehouse, cornerstone.team. Happy Holy Week, guys. We'll see you next time.
On the flippity flop.
Say bye, Nathan.
Bye.